The conference room aboard Zenith Prime Station was massive. It stretched out like a cathedral, with walls that seemed to reach into infinity. Hundreds of alien species filled the chamber, their strange bodies sitting in seats designed for forms humans could barely understand. Some had tentacles, others had wings, and a few seemed to float without any visible means of support. The air smelled wrong to human senses, a mixture of chemicals and scents from a dozen different worlds. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the center of it all, his uniform crisp and clean despite the long journey from Earth. He was a tall man with short brown hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Beside him stood Ambassador Lisa Grant, a woman in her 50s with gray streaking through her black hair. She had negotiated treaties with 17 different alien species, but today felt different. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. On Jake's other side was Paul Henderson, the tactical officer who had accompanied them from Earth. Paul was young, barely 30, but his mind worked faster than any computer when it came to reading hostile situations. Right now, every muscle in his body was tense. He could feel the hostility radiating from the assembled aliens like heat from a fire. At the far end of the chamber, Supreme Chancellor Vexus rose from his throne. He was a Corthan, a species that looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird. His scales shimmered with colors that shifted as he moved, and his eyes were dark and cold. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber with mechanical amplification. "Commander Morrison, Ambassador Grant, you stand before the Galactic Council to answer for the crimes of humanity." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his face neutral. Crimes. They were calling human expansion a crime now. Lisa stepped forward, her voice calm and measured. "Supreme Chancellor, humanity has committed no crimes. We have followed all established protocols for colonization. We have respected the territorial boundaries of every species we have encountered. We have engaged in fair trade and diplomatic relations." Vexus made a sound that might have been a laugh. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "You have expanded too quickly. In 200 years you have claimed 47 worlds. You have built a fleet that rivals the combined forces of a dozen council species. You ignore our regulations and create your own trade networks." "We ignore nothing," Lisa replied. "The regulations you mention were written 5,000 years ago, long before humanity reached the stars. They do not account for a species with our population needs or our economic systems. We have repeatedly requested that the Council update these laws to reflect current reality." Another alien stood up, this one a Velcros with skin like polished metal. "The Council does not change laws because one species demands it. You are newcomers here. You should learn your place." Jake couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Our place? We've been nothing but cooperative. We've shared our medical technology freely. We've helped defend Council shipping lanes from pirates. We've asked for nothing except the freedom to grow and prosper." The chamber erupted in noise. Dozens of aliens began speaking at once in their various languages, the translation system struggling to keep up. Jake caught fragments of what they were saying. Dangerous, aggressive, cannot be trusted. The words stung because they were so unfair. Humanity had done everything right, and still, they were treated like criminals. Vexus raised one clawed hand and silence fell immediately. "The Council has made its decision. Humanity will reduce its military fleet by 70%. You will submit to Council oversight for all future colonial expansion. You will accept permanent observers on every human world. These terms are not negotiable." Lisa's face went pale. "Supreme Chancellor, those terms would cripple human civilization. Our fleet protects over 12 billion people across dozens of worlds. Without adequate defense, we would be vulnerable to every pirate and raider in the galaxy." "Then perhaps you should not have expanded so aggressively," Vexus replied. His tone was cold, final. "You have 30 days to comply. If you refuse, the Council will impose economic sanctions. All trade with human worlds will cease. Any human ships found outside your designated territory will be seized. And if you still refuse after that, the Council enforcement fleet will be authorized to use military force to ensure compliance." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jake felt anger burning in his chest, hot and fierce. They were being backed into a corner, threatened with destruction simply because they had dared to succeed. Paul leaned close to Jake and whispered, "They're scared of us." Jake nodded slightly. Paul was right. This wasn't about regulations or galactic stability. This was about fear. The Council had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, comfortable in their power. Then humanity had arrived, growing faster and achieving more in 2 centuries than most species did in millennia. The Council saw the future and it terrified them. Lisa tried one more time. Supreme Chancellor, please reconsider. Humanity wants peace. We want cooperation. These demands will only breed resentment and conflict. Surely we can find a compromise that satisfies everyone. There is no compromise, Vexus said. You will comply, or you will face the consequences. This council is adjourned. The Supreme Chancellor sat down and the assembled aliens began filing out of the chamber. Some of them cast glances at the humans as they passed. Looks that ranged from pity to contempt. A few seemed almost apologetic, as if they disagreed with the decision but lacked the courage to speak against it. When the chamber was finally empty except for the 3 humans, Lisa let out a long breath. Well, that could have gone better. Jake turned to face her. What do we do now? We go home and report to the president, Lisa said. This decision is too big for us to make. The entire human race needs to decide how we respond. Paul was already pulling up data on his tablet. The Council Enforcement Fleet has over 1,500 ships. We have maybe 500 combat-ready vessels spread across all our territory. If it comes to war, the numbers aren't on our side. Numbers aren't everything, Jake said quietly. He had studied military history his entire life. He knew that smaller forces had defeated larger ones countless times throughout human history. The question is whether the Council knows how to use their numbers. Whether they understand what war really means. Lisa looked at him sharply. You think we should fight? I think we should be ready to fight, Jake corrected. I think we should make it clear that we won't be bullied or threatened into giving up everything we've built. But I also think that when the Council realizes what fighting humanity actually means, they might reconsider their ultimatum. They walked back to their ship in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The Liberty was waiting for them, a sleek vessel built for both diplomacy and defense. It represented everything humanity had become since reaching the stars. Sophisticated, powerful, and ready for anything. As they boarded, Jake looked back at Zenith Prime Station one last time. It gleamed in the light of the nearby star, a monument to galactic civilization and cooperation. He wondered if it would still be standing in 30 days, or if the Council's fear and arrogance would tear everything apart. The journey back to Earth would take 3 days. Jake suspected those would be the last peaceful days humanity would see for a long time. The Council had made their choice and now humanity would make theirs. And when the dust settled, the galaxy would learn a lesson it should have understood from the beginning. Humans could not be overpowered, because humanity had spent 10,000 years learning how to survive against impossible odds. The Liberty's engines hummed to life, and they began the long journey home. The Situation Room in the White House was filled with the most powerful people in human civilization. President Helen Carter sat at the head of the long table, her hands folded in front of her. She was a woman who had led humanity through economic crises and natural disasters. But war with an alien coalition was something entirely different. Her face showed the weight of the decision ahead. Fleet Admiral Greg Hughes stood at the front of the room, a holographic display showing the tactical situation hovering in the air before him. He was a career military man, 60 years old with more combat experience than anyone else in the room. His gray hair was cut short, and his uniform was decorated with medals from 3 separate conflicts. The numbers are not good, Greg said bluntly. The Council Enforcement Fleet has approximately 1,500 ships. They've been pulling vessels from every member species and they're still gathering more. We have 512 combat-ready ships spread across our territory. In a straight fight, we're outnumbered 3-1. A woman near the end of the table spoke up. She was General Kevin Ross, though everyone just called her Kevin. She commanded the Marine forces, the soldiers who would fight if enemies boarded human ships or invaded human worlds. But it won't be a straight fight, will it? Greg smiled slightly. No, it won't be. And that's where things get interesting. He changed the holographic display. Now it showed comparative data on human and alien military forces. The Council has made several critical errors in their assessment of humanity. The first is that they judge military power purely by the number of ships. They see our smaller fleet and assume we're weak. They don't understand that warfare isn't just about having more guns. Lisa Grant, who had returned from Zenith Prime just hours ago, leaned forward. The Council species have very little actual combat experience. We've analyzed their military history. Most of them achieved space travel before they developed advanced weapons. Their wars were small, limited affairs, nothing like what humans have experienced. Claire Bennett, the intelligence officer, pulled up her own data. She was young for her position, only 35, but her mind was sharp as a razor. I've been reviewing everything we know about Council military doctrine. Their tactics are based on simulations and theoretical models. They've fought maybe a dozen real battles in the last 500 years, and most of those were against pirates or small rebel groups. They have no experience with large-scale warfare. President Carter looked around the table. And we do? Madam President, Greg said quietly, humanity has been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We've had wars that killed millions, wars that lasted decades, wars fought with stones and wars fought with nuclear weapons. We've learned lessons that no other species in this galaxy has ever had to learn. We know what works and what doesn't, not from theory, but from blood and experience. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what he was saying. Humanity's violent past, the thing that had almost destroyed them before they reached the stars, was now their greatest advantage. A man at the far end of the table raised his hand. He was the Secretary of Defense, a politician who had never served in the military. But even with experience, can we really win against those numbers? Kevin stood up. The Council doesn't understand how humans fight. They've watched our history, seen our wars, and dismissed it all as primitive barbarism. They think that because they have better shields and more ships, they'll win. They don't understand that war isn't about technology. It's about will, creativity, and the refusal to lose. She pulled up footage from a training exercise. It showed human ships moving in patterns that seemed chaotic, breaking formation and attacking from unexpected angles. Our pilots train differently than theirs. Council pilots follow strict formations and predetermined attack patterns. Our pilots are taught to improvise, to adapt, to use the environment as a weapon. Every human captain has the authority to make tactical decisions without waiting for orders from command. Greg nodded. The Council fleet is like a machine. It's powerful, but it's rigid. It follows a program. Humanity is like water. We flow around obstacles. We find weaknesses. We exploit every advantage, no matter how small. Claire brought up another display. We've also identified specific vulnerabilities in their technology. Their shields are strong against directed energy weapons, which is why they feel confident. But their shields are designed to stop the kind of attacks they expect. We've been developing weapons specifically to counter their defenses. Kinetic impactors, electromagnetic pulses, and boarding tactics that they've never encountered before. President Carter listened to all of this, her face thoughtful. You're all very confident. But confidence doesn't stop people from dying. If we fight, how many will we lose? The room went quiet again. Greg finally spoke. There's no such thing as a clean war, Madam President. People will die. Ships will be destroyed. But if we surrender to their demands, if we dismantle our fleet and accept their control, we lose everything. We become second-class citizens in our own territory. Our children will grow up in a galaxy where humanity is weak and subservient. I can't tell you that war is the right choice, but I can tell you that surrender is definitely the wrong one. Lisa spoke up. There's another factor to consider. The Council isn't unified. Several member species oppose this ultimatum. The Korthan Empire and the Velcros Dominion are pushing for confrontation, but others just went along because they were scared to disagree. If we show strength, if we prove that we can't be easily defeated, some of those species might withdraw their support. You're suggesting we call their bluff? The President asked. I'm suggesting that the Council has never faced real resistance before, Lisa replied. Every species they've threatened has backed down. They expect us to do the same. When we don't, when we show them that humanity won't be bullied, their coalition might start to crack. President Carter stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the lights of Washington, D.C., millions of people going about their lives unaware that their entire future was being decided in this room. She thought about all those people, all 12 billion humans spread across dozens of worlds. They were her responsibility. She turned back to face the room. We've spent 200 years building a civilization among the stars. We've done it peacefully, following every rule, respecting every boundary. And now we're being told to give it all up, because we had the audacity to succeed. I will not accept that. I will not condemn humanity to a future of weakness and submission. She looked at Greg. Admiral, prepare the fleet for combat operations. Deploy our forces to defensive positions. Make it clear to the Council that we will not back down. She looked at Lisa. Ambassador, send a message to every Council member species. Tell them that humanity wants peace, but we will not be threatened. Tell them that if they come for us, they'll learn why humans survived 10,000 years of warfare on Earth. She looked at Claire. Find me every piece of intelligence you can on the Council Enforcement Fleet. I want to know their commanders, their tactics, their weaknesses. If we're going to fight smart. Finally, she looked at Kevin. General, prepare the Marines. If this war comes to boarding actions and ground combat, I want us to show them what human soldiers can really do. The room erupted in activity as people began making calls and issuing orders. Jake Morrison, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, stood up and approached the President. Madam President, the Council expects us to surrender. They think we're bluffing. Helen Carter looked at him with steel in her eyes. Then they're about to learn that humans don't bluff. We survive, and we're very, very good at it. The 30 days passed like a countdown to the end of the world. Across human space, fleets mobilized and civilians evacuated from the most vulnerable colonies. Everyone knew what was coming. The Council had made their intentions clear, and humanity had made theirs equally clear. There would be no surrender. Vice Admiral Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Endeavour, watching the sensor displays with careful eyes. He was responsible for defending New Hope, a colony world that was home to 2 million humans. It was also the closest human world to Council space, which made it the obvious first target. Ryan was 50 years old, with a weathered face and hands that had been steady on ship controls for 30 years. The defense fleet at New Hope consisted of 200 ships. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and everyone knew it. But Ryan had spent the last month preparing for this moment. He had studied the terrain, plotted gravitational currents, and positioned his forces with the precision of a chess master. If the Council wanted New Hope, they would have to pay for it in blood. Admiral, we've got incoming, his sensor officer called out. The woman's voice was steady, but Ryan could hear the tension beneath it. Multiple hyperspace signatures. Looks like the entire Council enforcement fleet. Ryan felt his heart rate increase, but his hands remained steady. Give me a count. 1,573 ships, sir. They're arranged in a standard Council battle wall formation. A battle wall. Ryan almost smiled. The Council was doing exactly what he expected. They were going to try to intimidate him with sheer numbers, rolling forward in a massive formation that looked impressive, but was actually tactically inflexible. The communication system crackled to life. A face appeared on the screen, a Velcros with metallic skin and eyes like dark mirrors. I am High Admiral Zarthan of the Council Enforcement Fleet. The colony of New Hope is hereby ordered to surrender immediately. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Ryan stepped forward, making sure Zarthan could see his face clearly. Hi, Admiral. I am Vice Admiral Ryan Blake of the Earth Defense Fleet. New Hope is a sovereign human colony. We will not surrender. Zarthan's expression didn't change. The Velcros didn't have much in the way of facial expressions. You are outnumbered almost 8 to 1. Resistance is pointless. Surrender now and no one needs to die. We have 2 million civilians on this world, Ryan replied. Give us 6 hours to evacuate them to the inner system. After that, you can have your battle. Zarthan considered this. 6 hours was nothing compared to the time it had taken to assemble his fleet, and the offer made him look merciful, which would play well with some of the Council species who were uncomfortable with this entire war. Agreed, you have 6 hours. After that, we will advance and we will not offer terms again. The communication cut off. Ryan's first officer, a woman named Commander Sarah Martinez, looked at him with raised eyebrows. You're actually going to evacuate the civilians? Yes, Ryan said. But not because Zarthan told me to. Because keeping them safe is our job. And besides, I need those 6 hours to finish positioning our forces. Sarah understood immediately. She had served with Ryan for 15 years and knew how his mind worked. You're setting a trap. The Council thinks in straight lines, Ryan explained. They see a target. They advance in formation. They overwhelm with numbers. It's worked for them for thousands of years because no one has ever challenged it. But we're not no one. We're humans, and we've been fighting war since before we had words for war. Over the next 6 hours, civilian transports lifted off from New Hope by the hundreds. They carried families, children, elderly people who had come to this world to build a new life. Now they were fleeing because the Council couldn't accept humanity's success. Ryan watched them go and felt anger burning in his chest. These people had done nothing wrong. They had just wanted to live in peace, but there would be no peace today. As the deadline approached, Ryan gave his final orders. His ships broke their defensive formation and scattered across the system. Some moved toward the moon, others toward the asteroid belt. Still others positioned themselves near the gas giant in the outer system. To the Council fleet, it must have looked like chaos, like the humans were panicking and breaking formation. That's exactly what Ryan wanted them to think. Zarthan's fleet began its advance. 1,500 ships moving in perfect formation, a wall of metal and energy that stretched across the blackness of space. They entered the gravity well of New Hope's moon, still maintaining their rigid formation. Standard Council tactics said that breaking formation showed weakness, so they held their positions even as they passed into the moon's gravitational field. Ryan waited. He watched the sensor displays, calculated vectors and velocities in his head. He had one chance to make this work. If he mistimed it, his fleet would be destroyed and 2 million civilians would be at the Council's mercy. All ships, he said calmly into the communication system. Execute pattern chaos. The human fleet exploded into motion. Ships that had been hiding behind the moon slingshot around it, using the gravity well to accelerate to incredible speeds. They came at the Council fleet from angles that the aliens hadn't anticipated, moving too fast for the rigid formation to respond effectively. The Council ships tried to turn, tried to bring their weapons to bear, but their formation was their weakness. They were too close together, unable to maneuver without risking collision with their neighbors. Human ships wove between them like sharks in a feeding frenzy, targeting specific weak points that human intelligence had identified years ago. Ryan's flagship led a group of 20 ships directly through the center of the Council formation. They fired kinetic impactors, simple chunks of metal accelerated to relativistic speeds. The Council shields, designed to stop energy weapons, did almost nothing against solid projectiles, moving at a significant fraction of light speed. 3 Council ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. 5 more were crippled, spinning out of control with their hulls torn open. The perfect formation began to fracture as ships broke away, trying to protect themselves. Boarding teams go, Ryan ordered. Small craft launched from human ships, each carrying a squad of Marines. They attached to disabled Council vessels and burned through the hulls. What happened next was something the Council had never experienced before. Human soldiers poured into alien ships with weapons drawn and tactics refined over centuries of ground combat. The alien crew, who had never trained for boarding actions, were overwhelmed in minutes. Some surrendered immediately. Others tried to fight, but found themselves facing enemies who moved with coordination and violence that shocked them to their cores. The battle lasted 4 hours. It was chaos and fire and the screaming of metal torn apart by weapons never meant for use this close. Ships exploded. People died on both sides. But when it was over, the Council fleet was retreating, leaving behind 300 destroyed or captured vessels. Ryan's fleet had lost 47 ships. It hurt. Each loss was felt like a physical blow. But they had won. Against odds of 8 to 1, they had won. On the main screen, Ryan watched the Council fleet jump to hyperspace, fleeing the system they had come to conquer. He felt no joy in victory, only a grim satisfaction. The Council had learned their first lesson. Humanity could not be overpowered by numbers alone. Sarah stood beside him, looking at the debris field that now orbited New Hope. "What do you think they'll do now?" "They'll send more ships," Ryan said quietly. "They'll convince themselves this was a fluke, that next time will be different. But it won't be. Every time they come for us, we'll make them pay. And eventually they'll realize that fighting humanity is a losing game." He turned to his crew. "Get me a casualty report. And send a message to Earth. Tell them New Hope is still ours. Tell them humanity doesn't back down." The crew erupted in cheers. They had faced impossible odds and survived. They had proven that humans could stand against the entire galaxy if they had to, and that was a message that would echo across the stars. The war spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. The Council, shocked by their defeat at New Hope, refused to accept that they had been beaten by an inferior force. They called up more reserves, pulled ships from defense fleets across their territory, and committed themselves to total victory. Pride and fear drove them forward. and nothing humanity said could change their minds. Captain Nicole Fisher sat in the cockpit of her fighter, surrounded by the silence of space. She led a squadron of 36 pilots, men and women who had volunteered to fly the most dangerous missions in the war. Right now they were hiding in an asteroid field, waiting for the Council patrol that intelligence said would pass through in the next hour. Nicole was 32 years old, with red hair tied back in a tight bun and eyes that never missed a detail. She had been flying since she was 16, and she understood spacecraft the way some people understood music. Her fighter was an extension of her body, responding to her thoughts as much as her controls. "Contact," her sensor officer said. "3 Council destroyers heading our way on a standard patrol pattern." Nicole felt her heart rate steady. This was the moment she lived for. Remember the plan. We herd them toward the cluster, then break off. Let gravity do the work. Her squadron confirmed, and they waited. The Council ships appeared on sensors, 3 massive vessels that could each carry 1,000 crew members. They were powerful, heavily armed, and completely unaware of the danger they were flying into. "Now," Nicole said. The human fighters burst from the asteroid field, weapons blazing. They didn't try to destroy the Council ships. They just wanted to get their attention, to make them angry, to make them chase. It worked. The Council ships detected the attack and immediately changed course, pursuing the fighters with all the fury of a wounded predator. Their weapons lit up space with energy blasts, but the fighters were small and fast, weaving between asteroids with precision that the larger ships couldn't match. Nicole led them deeper into the field, toward a cluster of asteroids that her team had spent 3 days analyzing. The rocks were held in a delicate gravitational balance, orbiting each other in complex patterns. One wrong move could destabilize the entire system. The Council ships followed, firing constantly, determined to destroy the insects that had dared to attack them. They were so focused on the fighters that they didn't notice when Nicole's squadron suddenly broke formation and scattered in different directions. The lead Council destroyer, trying to follow multiple targets at once, fired a heavy energy weapon at one of the fighters. The blast missed its target and struck a large asteroid instead. The explosion changed the asteroid's velocity, and like dominoes falling, the entire cluster began to destabilize. Asteroids crashed into each other, breaking apart and sending fragments flying in all directions. The Council ships, massive and slow to maneuver, couldn't dodge fast enough. Rocks the size of buildings slammed into their hulls, tearing through armor and rupturing systems. Within minutes, all 3 ships were dead in space, their crews scrambling to evacuate before life support failed. Nicole and her squadron regrouped outside the asteroid field. They had lost 1 pilot, a man named Danny who had been caught in the initial barrage. Nicole felt the loss like a knife in her chest, but she couldn't mourn now. There would be time for that later. "Good work, everyone," she said into the communication system. "Let's go home." Across human space, similar victories were being won. Commander Derek Stone led a specialized boarding team that had captured 17 Council ships in the last month. His team consisted of 50 Marines, men and women trained in close-quarters combat and zero-gravity operations. Derek was a big man, over 6 feet tall with muscles built from years of training. His face was scarred from a previous battle and his eyes were hard, but his team trusted him completely because he never sent them anywhere he wouldn't go himself. Right now, they were floating in space next to a disabled Council cruiser. The ship was still functional, but an earlier battle had damaged its engines, leaving it stranded. The Council crew was trying to make repairs, unaware that human Marines were about to pay them a visit. "Breach in 3, 2, 1, Derek said. The cutting torch burned through the hull, and Derek's team poured through the opening. What happened next was brutal and efficient. The Council crew had never been trained for this kind of combat. Most of them were technicians and support staff, not soldiers. When armored humans appeared in their corridors, moving with weapons drawn in perfect coordination, they panicked. Derek's team swept through the ship in 15 minutes. They used stun weapons when possible, not wanting to kill unnecessarily, but they showed no hesitation when faced with resistance. Room by room, deck by deck, they took control of the ship until the Council captain had no choice but to surrender. "Ship secure," Derek reported to his command ship. "Minimal casualties on both sides. We've got about 800 prisoners." The human command acknowledged, and Derek began the process of processing prisoners and securing the captured vessel. It was his 18th capture, and the routine was familiar now. But he never forgot what they were fighting for. Every ship captured was one less ship threatening human worlds. Every council crew member who surrendered was one less enemy they had to kill. Back on Earth, President Helen Carter received the reports with mixed feelings. Humanity was winning every battle. The casualty ratios were absurdly favorable. In every engagement, the Council lost more ships, more crew, more resources, but they kept coming. The Council's pride wouldn't let them back down, and their numbers meant they could sustain losses that humanity couldn't match. "We're winning the battles but losing the war," Fleet Admiral Greg Hughes said during one of their daily briefings. "We've destroyed or captured over 700 Council ships. We've defended every colony they've attacked. But we've lost 130 ships ourselves, and we can't replace them as fast as we're losing them." President Carter nodded. She understood the mathematics. Humanity's economy was strong, their production was efficient, but they were one species fighting against an alliance of dozens. Eventually, the numbers would catch up. "We need to change the game," she said. "We need to do something that forces the Council to reconsider this entire war." Claire Bennett, the intelligence officer, had been thinking about this problem for weeks. She brought up a holographic display showing Zenith Prime, the Council's headquarters station. What if we could deliver a message directly to their leadership? Not through diplomatic channels, but in person. Show them that if we wanted to, we could strike anywhere, anytime. Lisa Grant looked skeptical. "You're suggesting we infiltrate Zenith Prime? That's suicide." "Not if we do it right," Claire replied. "We don't go in shooting. We go in quietly, deliver our message, and leave. The point isn't to cause damage. It's to prove a point. That humanity has been fighting defensively, but we could go on the offensive anytime we want." Greg Hughes studied the station's layout. It would take a special operations team, the best we have, and they would need perfect intelligence on the station's security. "I can get the intelligence," Claire said, "and I know who should lead the team. Lieutenant Commander Sharon Wells. She's led 14 successful covert operations. If anyone can do this, it's her." President Carter considered the proposal. It was risky, maybe even reckless, but the alternative was a war of attrition that humanity would eventually lose. "Make it happen. But make it clear to Commander Wells that this is a stealth mission. We're not trying to start a massacre. We're trying to end a war." Lieutenant Commander Sharon Wells was briefed on the mission 3 days later. She was a woman in her late 30s with dark skin and sharp eyes. She had spent 15 years in special operations, running missions that officially never happened. This would be her most dangerous assignment yet. She assembled her team carefully. 10 people, each an expert in their field. Infiltration specialists, combat experts, technical operators. They spent 2 weeks planning every detail, studying every angle, preparing for every contingency. "We're going into the heart of the Council," Sharon told her team during their final briefing. "We're going to walk right into their headquarters and deliver a message they can't ignore. And then we're going to walk back out." Questions? One of her team members, a young man named Carlos, raised his hand. "What if they try to stop us?" Sharon smiled grimly. "Then we remind them why humanity doesn't lose." The Council supply ship drifted through space toward Zenith Prime, its cargo holds filled with food and equipment for the station's massive population. No one aboard knew that 10 human special operations soldiers were hidden in those cargo holds, breathing recycled air and waiting for their moment. Sharon Wells checked her equipment for the 100th time. Her team was equipped with advanced stealth suits that could fool most sensors, weapons that could be concealed until needed, and enough determination to walk into the heart of enemy territory without flinching. She had led dangerous missions before, but nothing compared to this. 5 minutes to docking. Carlos whispered through the team channel. He was monitoring the ship's systems, making sure they stayed hidden from the crew. Sharon felt her heart beating steadily in her chest. Fear was normal. Fear was healthy. But she couldn't let it control her. She had a job to do, and millions of lives depended on her success. The supply ship docked with Zenith Prime, and the cargo was unloaded by automated systems. Sharon's team slipped out during the transfer, moving through maintenance corridors that Claire Bennett's intelligence had identified. They moved like ghosts, leaving no trace of their presence. Zenith Prime was enormous, a city in space that housed representatives from dozens of species. Sharon's team had studied the layout for weeks, memorizing every corridor, every security checkpoint, every camera. Now they put that knowledge to use, avoiding detection as they made their way toward the council chamber. They reached the chamber during a session, with all the council representatives present. Sharon could hear voices echoing through the halls. Aliens arguing about the war, about casualties, about whether to continue fighting or seek peace. Some wanted to increase military action. Others were having doubts. Ready? Sharon asked her team. They confirmed, and Sharon activated the device that Claire had designed. It would broadcast their message to every council world simultaneously, bypassing all communication filters. The council leadership couldn't stop it or edit it. For the first time, ordinary citizens across the galaxy would hear humanity's side of the story. Sharon's team moved into position. Then on her signal, they entered the council chamber. The effect was immediate. Hundreds of aliens turned to stare at the humans who had somehow appeared in the most secure location in council space. Security forces reached for weapons, but Sharon raised her hands, showing she was unarmed. "We're not here to fight," she said, her voice calm and clear. "We're here to deliver a message." Supreme Chancellor Vexus rose from his throne, his scales changing colors rapidly in what Sharon recognized as surprise and anger. "This is an act of war. Guards, seize them." "You can try," Sharon replied. "But first you might want to listen to what we have to say. Because right now every citizen in council space is listening too." She gestured, and a holographic image appeared above the chamber. It showed Jake Morrison, standing on the bridge of a human ship. He looked tired, like a man who had seen too much war, but his voice was strong. "People of the council species," Jake began. "My name is Commander Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet. I'm speaking to you today because your leaders have kept the truth from you. They started this war, not humanity. They threatened us, demanded we dismantle our civilization, and when we refused, they attacked." The hologram showed footage from the Battle of New Hope. Council ships advancing in their perfect formation, human ships fighting with desperate courage. The explosions, the casualties on both sides, the terrible cost of war. "Your leaders told you we were dangerous," Jake continued. "They said we were aggressive, that we needed to be controlled. But look at the evidence. In every battle humanity has been defending. We've never attacked a council world. We've never targeted civilian populations. We've fought only to protect our people and our right to exist." The hologram changed to show graphs and statistics. In the past 3 months, over 40,000 council military personnel have died in this war. Humanity has lost 7,000. These numbers aren't a source of pride for us. Every death on both sides is a tragedy. But these numbers tell a story. They tell you that your leadership sent your people to fight an enemy they didn't understand. Jake's expression grew more serious. "Humanity has been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We've learned hard lessons about combat, about survival, about what it takes to win against impossible odds. Your military is brave, but they're not trained for the kind of warfare humanity knows. Every time you send ships against us, we win not because we're stronger, but because we're more experienced." The hologram showed captured council ships, prisoners being treated humanely by human forces. "We've captured over 300 of your ships. We've taken thousands of prisoners. And every single one has been treated with dignity and respect. We've provided medical care, proper food, and safety, because that's who humans are. We don't fight out of hatred. We fight because we have no other choice." Jake paused, letting his words sink in. "Your leaders fear humanity's potential. They're right to. We are powerful, and we're growing stronger every day. But power isn't what makes humanity dangerous. What makes us dangerous is that we refuse to be victims. We refuse to accept that might makes right. We refuse to bow to threats and ultimatums." The hologram showed human colonies, families living in peace, children playing in parks on distant worlds. "This is what your leaders want to destroy. Not because we've done anything wrong, but because we dared to succeed. Because we built something beautiful and strong and it scared them." Jake's voice grew harder. "Humanity could win this war through total warfare. We could strike at your homeworlds. We could target civilian infrastructure. We could fight the way some of our ancestors did, with no mercy and no restraint. But we won't, because that's not who we are. We're fighting for the right to exist, not for conquest or domination." He leaned forward, looking directly at the camera. "So here's our offer. End this war now. Negotiate fair terms that recognize humanity's right to grow and prosper. In return, we'll share our knowledge of warfare and defense. We'll help train your military forces. We'll work together to make the galaxy safer for everyone. Or you can continue fighting and keep losing people for a war that was never necessary." The hologram faded, and Sharon looked at Supreme Chancellor Vexus. "That message is being broadcast on every council world right now. Your people know the truth. They know what you've done, and they know what humanity is offering. The choice is yours. Before Vexus could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Sharon's tactical display showed that her team had been detected, and security forces were moving to intercept them. "Time to go," she said to her team. They moved quickly, retracing their path through the station. Security forces tried to stop them, but Sharon's team was too fast, too well trained. They used stun weapons to incapacitate guards without killing them, proving even now that humanity chose mercy over brutality. They reached their extraction point, just as a human stealth ship decloaked nearby. Within minutes, they were away from Zenith Prime and jumping to hyperspace, leaving chaos behind them. Across Council space, the reaction was immediate. Citizens who had been told humanity was a threat now saw the truth. They saw footage of humans fighting defensively, treating prisoners well, offering peace instead of demanding surrender. They saw the casualty numbers and realized their people were dying for a war their leaders had started. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds. Several council member species announced they were withdrawing their forces from the war. The coalition that had seemed so strong was fracturing, as species realized they had been led into a conflict based on fear and pride rather than necessity. 6 months later, Jake Morrison returned to Zenith Prime. This time he walked through the front door, accompanied by Ambassador Lisa Grant and a full diplomatic team. The council chamber was different now. Supreme Chancellor Vexus had been removed from power, and new leadership had taken over. The treaty they signed that day was called the New Accord. It granted humanity full membership in the council, with voting rights equal to any other species. It established mutual defense agreements and trade partnerships. And most importantly, it included a provision for human military advisors to work with council defense forces. Jake stood at the observation window, watching as human ships and council ships conducted training exercises together. Former enemies were learning to fight alongside each other, preparing for threats from beyond known space. Paul Henderson joined him at the window. "It's strange, isn't it? They feared we would dominate them through force. Instead, we're helping them become stronger." Jake nodded. "That's what they never understood. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to live in it freely. And if that means teaching others how to defend themselves, that's fine with us." Lisa approached them, a satisfied smile on her face. "The first joint training mission is launching next week. Human and Velcro ships working together. A year ago, that would have been impossible. A year ago, they thought humans could be overpowered," Jake said. "They learned the hard way that we can't. Not because we're the strongest, but because we're survivors. And now they're learning to survive too." He turned away from the window and looked at his companions.